Hi, I'm Jake. I make RPG supplements and videos about Pathfinder 2, or PF2. I love PF2, and I have experienced so many different games and game settings that I want to bring to you what I find joy in, or find creative. And so today we're talking about the Time Mage from Dark Archive. This, I took a couple of levels with an NPC. I haven't tried the NPC out yet. It's in a continuing campaign. It's on the live stream. It's the Outlaws of Alkenstar, the much later editions, like number 13, I think we're at. And it has a couple fascinating things. So that's why I wanted to bring it to you, because it seems to qualify as another weird archetype that you guys said you wanted to hear about. So I'm going to read the lore and intro and then all the feats and talk to you about how to change them or whether they're good or not, because they're not all good. That's how most archetypes work in classes. Time Mage. Magic leaves its brand on those who practice it. The veteran pyromancer bears the scorch marks of lessons learned. The archdruid grows to resemble plants or animals in their domain or grove. The professional reanimator can never quite cover up the stench of their grim work. The mark left by the practice of time magic is less obvious, but no less indelible. With other disciplines, the marks of experience accumulate as magic is learned, creating an equilibrium of sorts between the exercise of power and the necessary consequences. Time magic suffers no such limitations of cause and effect. Distortions and anachronistic thoughts echo back throughout a time mage's entire life, providing a non-linear perspective that others can find distracting or even alien. The threat of creating a paradox is ever looming. Many a reckless time mage has inadvertently erased themselves from existence, glimpsed a future that they now have no choice but to enact, or attracted the attentions of temporal creatures such as Eries or Sic Temporas. Those are cool. For these reasons, most mages merely dabble in time magic, learning a spell or two here and there. Despite the dangers, a brave few embrace the discipline, for it offers the allure of changing what was and controlling what will be. Before we get into the Time Mage dedication, I want to mention from another game that I played, another game system. I love that in that game system, a creature of time, a spirit, it's called a time paradox spirit, named Wrinkle, supposed to have this white wrinkled suit and be an old wrinkly dude. He comes up to the mage that used time magic and offers them the chance to take back the use of the time magic and rewinds time if they're willing. If they're not, he erases them from the time stream. They're not dead. Their friends never knew they existed. I love that. I'm going to see if I can use that somewhere. That's going to be fun. Time Mage dedication, level 6 feat. Prerequisites. You have a spellcasting class feature. You might be a novice in the temporal arts now, but in the future you'll hold time in the palm of your hand. As some of your future knowledge leaks back to your present self, you gain the Delay Consequence domain spell. It costs 1 focus point to cast a focus spell. This feat grants a focus pool of 1 focus point that you can recover, but it's a focus spell. If you already knew Delay Consequence from a feat or ability that allows you to gain your choice of domain spell, such as Domain Initiate, then when you take this feat, you can retrain that option to gain a different domain spell as your personal timeline rearranges itself. You also gain Time Sense as an innate cantrip usable at will. This innate spell and your focus spells from the Time Mage archetype are of the same tradition as the spells you used to meet the archetype's prerequisites. Time Sense is fun, but because it's a spell, you have to choose to use it. So maybe if your GM is cool, you can just say, I'm always casting this during exploration mode. It's always up. And maybe the player should remember to say that, because that could be useful. It's probably the most useful time it's going to happen. Because Time Sense doesn't really come up that much. Slow and Haste are time spells, but there aren't a ton of time spells. And time effects outside of that are very few. They're rare. For certain adventures, though, like when you're already traveling through time, this can be an amazingly useful archetype. I put my PCs 5,000 years back in the past in Ancient Assyrian. It's in the live stream if you want to see it. I'll link it at the end. The Delay Consequence Domain spell, it puts off the effects of something happening for 1 round. It's a reaction, range is 30 feet, target a creature or object within range is hit by an attack. It doesn't have to be a strike, it just has to be an attack. So it says you transpose the moment that the target would be injured to later in its time stream, roll damage normally, but do not reduce hit points or apply any other effects of the attack until the spell's duration has elapsed. When the spell ends, the target is immediately affected by the attack, taking damage and being affected by any additional effects. You can dismiss the spell. It gives you an extra round to respond to them getting completely screwed by, say, a dragon's breath. I thought in the beginning, when it first started covering PF2, that this sucked, but situationally it can be amazingly useful and save someone's life. A lot of this is situational, this whole archetype, but like I said, in the right situation, this can be nice. Like, you have an extra round to know that person is going to need healing, or you need to kill that thing before this happens, or you need to give cover to that person or something. You can prepare for it happening. And that is kind of rare in the system. Next feat, level 7, Chronocognizance, which is fun to say. It's a skill feat. Prerequisites, Master in Perception. The flows and ebbs of time are obvious to you, as are the tangles that form when it's distorted. You're automatically aware if any creature that you observe is under the effects of the slowed or quickened conditions. You have a general idea when you are in the vicinity of time-manipulating phenomena, though this grants you no particular insight into the specific effects of the anomaly, which is why you have the Time Sense spell. Particularly subtle temporal anomalies might still escape your notice, requiring a perception check, as determined by the GM. If you're legendary in arcana nature or occultism or religion, whenever a creature that you can observe gains the benefits of time stop or similar effects, you can observe what happens during the stopped time that you still can't act yourself for the duration. For a skill feat, totally useful. Just take it all the time. Anytime you get a chance to take this, take it. It won't come up that often, but it's a skill feat. It gives you a magical perceptive ability that's passive, that you can just gain information that will help your allies survive a combat or reveal the plot of things happening around you. Take it. Skill feat. Take it. Next feat, level 8, Chronomancer's Secrets. The secrets of time peel back, revealing deeper truths. You gain either the Stasis Domain spell or the Path of Least Resistance Focus spell. Increase the number of focus points in your pool by 1, blah, blah, blah. Special, you can take this feat a second time, gaining the focus spell that you didn't gain the first time, and then you increase the number of focus points. So much of this is repetitive because this is pre-Remaster. So, Path of Least Resistance I'm going to cover first, because it's the least impressive. And then the most complicated. So, I'm going to have to read this. It's difficult to summarize. It's a one-action spell. You trace several possible routes, quickly resetting the timeline until you find the safest one. Choose 3 spaces you could reach with 2 stride actions. Each must be at least 20 feet from the other 2. You stride twice to one of the spaces, determined randomly by the GM from among the paths you chose. If some of the paths contain a hidden danger, such as a trap that you would trigger by walking into the trap's affected area, the GM doesn't consider this path when randomly determining which one you take. But if all options have a hidden danger, the GM randomly chooses between all 3 paths. This movement doesn't trigger reactions. It really depends on your GM. In my games, this isn't going to be that useful, because I like changing adventures that exist, and I really don't like traps. I don't like traps or riddles. I like traps on things that they were going to do anyway. Like, here's the door to the Necromancer's secret chamber. Oh, you bet your ass it's trapped. Here's a giant chest that you found in the middle of the dungeon. Yes, it's trapped. But just walking down the hall, it kind of sucks. So this just wouldn't be useful for my players. But for GMs that do run traps, this can save your life. I think it's worth it for a focus point, situationally. But I would still take the other option. The Stasis Domain spell. So, I'm going to read this to you, and then I'm going to summarize, because it could be complicated. You have to target one creature or up to one bulk of objects, range 30 feet, saving throw will. The flow of time congeals around an object or creature holding it in place. The target must attempt a will save. An unattended object automatically critically fails its save. Critical success. The target is unaffected. Success. The target is stunned 1 as time thickens around it. Failure. Time ceases to pass for the target for 1 round. It is invulnerable to all damage. It cannot be targeted or affected by anything, and no rounds elapse for any timed durations, conditions, afflictions, or other effects it has. While in stasis, the target can't be moved, and it remains fixed in place, defying gravity if need be. Critical failure. As failure, but the target is held in stasis for 3 rounds. At the end of each of its turns, it can attempt a will save to reduce the remaining duration by 1 round, or end it entirely on a critical success. Yes, obviously, this is useful against a bad guy. You can target an enemy, and if they succeed, they're stunned. That's a great use of your actions. Stun an enemy. If they fail or critically fail, your team has time to strategize while they can't do shit. That's amazing. Even if that strategy is, I'm running away now. But you can also do this to an ally who is going to or is in a horrible state. It could be that they have a bunch of persistent damage on them, or they're in a pit of acid, or a dragon is about to breathe fire on them. You don't even have to touch them. You just target them. They choose to fail their save because they're an ally. I know it's not in the rules. It makes sense. Just go with it. Other GMs do the same thing. It's a house rule. They choose to critically fail, and they are immune to everything that could harm them during that time. Fucking amazing. This is a great 8-level feat. I'm excited to use this in-game on my NPC, because it could be super dramatic and fun. And I like that it's flexible. It's a good spell. It's a good feat. Next feat. Another level 8 feat, Future Spell Learning. More future memories of time magic percolate back to the present, teaching you spells you've yet to learn. Add Behold the Weave, Cast into Time, Haste, Loose Time's Arrow, Quicken Time, Slow, and Stagnate Time to your spell list. You can thus potentially learn these spells even if they aren't normally on your tradition spell list. That's great, because this archetype could be used for any spellcaster. You could be a primal spellcaster and learn all this shit. I like it. There's nothing to complain about here. It's just an optional feat to have access to a bunch of spells. And most of them are very useful. Next feat, level 8, What Could Have Been. It's a free action. It has the Concentrate and Metamagic feats. Spell Shape, in this case. Rather than conjuring creatures from elsewhere in the world or the planes, you can temporarily pull a much different version of yourself from an alternate timeline. For instance, instead of summoning a generic or random troll with Summon Giant, you summon a troll version of yourself from a timeline where you're a troll. I don't think that's a different timeline, but okay. If your next action is to cast a spell that summons a creature, that creature is another version of you. This creature remains the type of creature you summoned and has largely the same abilities plus the following adjustments, but it clearly resembles you, likely sharing some distinguishing features such as mannerisms, speech patterns, tattoos, or clothing. I would also go so far as to say that the two of you have a, positive connection between each other and can communicate freely. The summoned creature gains a +1 status bonus to any skill check in which you're trained, a +2 status bonus if you're an expert, a +3 status bonus if you're a master, or a +4 status bonus if you're legendary. I guess that kind of just assumes that you're going to get better at those things as time goes on. The creature also takes a -2 penalty to all skills in which you're untrained. I don't know why that makes any sense, but whatever. It's a free action. It's a spell shape or metamagic that doesn't take extra actions. That's super rare. It's for a small benefit, but that small benefit could be very useful. Like athletics. A giant that's better at wrestling people. That could be handy. It's there in case you want it, and it's funny. Level 10 feat, Into the Future. 1 action. It has the Concentrate and Metamagic traits, so spell shape. You know your spell will be needed not now, but in a few moments, so you cast your magic into the future. If your next action is to cast a spell that takes 1 or 2 actions to cast, the spell's effects occur 1 round later, at the beginning of your next turn, rather than immediately. Targets and choices about the spell must be determined when the spell is cast, and requirements such as line of sight and line of effect must be valid both when the spell is cast and when its effects occur. Consequences for the action of casting the spell itself, such as an attack of opportunity reaction or ending a foe's fascinated condition by taking a hostile action, aren't delayed. So you can like future cast and have that interrupted right now. That makes sense. Again, this is not always useful. But when it is, it's so weird and trippy, and you just can't do this with other classes or archetypes. It's a fun, weird mechanic, and it makes it seem like you're special. Because nobody else can do this shit. It's unique. And I like that a lot. So I would say that if you take this archetype, you have to take this because it's fun. It won't always come in handy, but when it does, you look awesome. Next feat, level 10, Read Disaster. It has the traits of Divination, Exploration, Oracle, and Prediction. Normally it's Oracle. It's 8th level for Oracles. You spend 10 minutes and open yourself to the divine mysteries of the world, peering into the most sinister portents of the future. You gain the effects of augury, except you learn only about the dangers ahead. Any result of weal are instead nothing, and results of weal and woe are instead woe. So you only learn about the things that are bad. If you're legendary in religion, you take only 1 minute to read disaster. If you started this archetype with a spellcasting class that you chose thoughtfully, then chances are you already know whether or not you want augury. Half of the spellcasting traditions have access to the spell augury, and it's 2nd level. I get that you can do this any number of times, but I don't know how that's much more beneficial. Like, this is a level 10 feat for a level 2 spell. It seems worthless, except that you can just keep redoing it about different ideas you have. I guess you would ask about a lot of different paths you could take and find out if they're all going to be bad. I guess augury's a 2nd level spell, though. You can memorize it multiple times, so you could still just do augury, or get a scroll of augury, or hire an augur. It doesn't seem worth a level 10 feat. It's just not cool enough or powerful enough. Like, augury itself, generally not a great spell. Partly because it just asks the GM what they're planning, and it's vague. And the GM could later change their mind because they fucking forgot. Level 10, I'd skip it. It's less hassle to skip it and take a different feat from something else. Next feat, level 12, Quickened Casting. It's a free action. Traits are Bard, Concentrate, Meta Magic, Spell Shape, Oracle, Sorcerer, Witch, Wizard. Frequency, once per day. If your next action is to cast a cantrip or a spell that is at least 2 levels lower than the highest level spell slot you have, reduce the number of actions to cast it by 1. Minimum 1 action. It's Quickened Casting. It's useful. But it's not weird and quirky like the rest of this archetype. So if you're taking this archetype anyway, and you are a caster if you're taking this archetype, so sure, may as well take it. Make your spells faster sometimes. I'm going to read this special, even though it seems silly. This can only be used on a cantrip or a spell from the class matching the one you gained this feat from. Right. Level 16 feat, Plot the Future. This has the Uncommon, Concentrate, Investigator, and Prediction traits. It's neat. It gives you something from Investigator. You spend 10 minutes in contemplation to uncannily predict how events will play out. Choose a particular goal or activity you plan to engage in within 1 week, or an event you expect might happen within 1 week. You analyze whether it's likely to come to pass, learning whether it's highly likely, somewhat unlikely, or highly unlikely. You also gain a piece of advice suggesting a course of action you or your allies could take that might make the chosen event more or less likely, whichever you prefer. The GM determines the likeliness of the event and the piece of advice you learn. This is called reveal plot. That's what this is. It doesn't say you can do this once per day. There's no limit on it. You just spend 10 minutes thinking about what you should do. This seems more annoying to me than the investigator who walks into a room and says, okay, what do I notice that's out of the ordinary? It's really great, but it will probably annoy your GM. All right, I have to say that if you're playing in a book module, a set adventure, and the GM usually doesn't go off-piste, then this is quite useful. This would have been useful for my team when they were doing the Outlaws of Alkenstar. They could know when events are going to happen because it says so in the books. This requires that your GM take notes after you use this ability. But it could be fun, as long as you can take your head out of characterness and just be in character, and then your character somehow knows all these things. I guess it seems really cool, and it would be fun to watch a player respond to events that are supposed to happen. I would have been entertained by it. But I think if it's not a pre-made adventure, and the GM still hasn't made up like what's going to happen in 2 weeks in game, then it's not all that useful. Because it just makes the GM decide that right then. But if you're level 16, you know your GM. That's just the way it is. Like, if you have played a character for this long to get to this level, you've learned who your GM is. If you are playing a level 20 adventure, you kind of only do that if you know the person well. Because that's kind of a big ask. That's a lot to take on. All right. Next feat, level 16, Purge of Moments, 3 actions. Frequency, once per hour. All things eventually end, a truth that you can put into practice by accelerating your passage through time to shake off harmful effects. 5 rounds of apparent time occur for you. No one, including you, can act during this time, but effects on you run their course, including beneficial effects, negative effects, afflictions, conditions, and persistent damage. Roll saving throws, flat checks, damage, and any other rolls for those effects normally, as if the time had passed. Excessive use of this technique is responsible for more than a few premature gray hairs among time mages. I like that this exists. It has the traits Concentrate and Transmutation. I think this should also exist for monks. Because in that case, it seems like I am focusing on my body processes and filtering out harmful effects. This is not frequently useful, but when it does, it keeps you from being kept out of the fight. Like, you can make a bunch of shit on you end, and then you can still contribute to the fight as far as your friends are concerned with just 1 round delay, because you have to do this action as 3 actions. So when this is useful, it's incredibly useful because it keeps you in the fight. Next feat, level 18. Timeline Splitting Spell, 3 actions, frequency once per day. You invest in 2 futures, then choose the one to make a reality. You cast 2 spells that each take 1 or 2 actions to cast. These can't be the same spell heightened to 2 different levels. You expend the resources for both spells, such as spell slots, focus points, and material components. Determine the immediate results for both spells, including attack rolls, saving throws, damage, and any other dice rolls. Then, choose which of the 2 spells take effect, using the previously made rolls. The other spell's resources are still expended, but the spell has no effect as the damage disappears in the other timeline. So, one of these spells you're just going to lose, but the other one is going to be extremely effective. fuck yeah. Can I have that now? This is great. This is great. Take this feat. Because, like, what if... We'll take an old classic, Fireball. What if your enemy saves against a Fireball, but then, like, you cast, I don't know, Cone of Cold? I know, 5e, D&D. But they critically fail versus that. So even if, like, both would be useful, one of them's probably going to be better than the other. And especially if it's an enemy that has, like, really high saving throws or is immune to certain things that you don't know yet, just cast different kinds of spells and you're still doing something on your turn that's useful. This is good. This is definitely good. This is great. I wouldn't say this is the reason to take this archetype because it's level 18. But actually, if you're starting at level 20, this is a reason to take this archetype because it's great. Last feat, level 20. Echoing spell. 1 action. It has the Concentrate, Metamagic, and Sorcerer tags. Spell shape. You time the components of your spell with exacting precision, setting up a resonance that duplicates the spell's effects. If your next action is to cast a spell of 4th level or lower that has no duration, the spell's energy reverberates and echoes. You can cast the spell a second time before the end of your next turn without expending a spell slot. It's just useful. Echoing spell is always useful for anyone who can take it, but in this case, you don't have to be a sorcerer. And that's cool. I think that echoing spell is really not always useful because you still have to cast the spell next turn. You don't lose it twice, but you still have to take the time to cast it. So you're not saving any actions. And this is taking an extra action. I guess it depends on your build. If you're doing a bunch of, like, damage spells, then, okay, yeah, I could see keeping Echoing Spell for that, for level 20. But otherwise, I've seen it used, and it's not always great. Like, it feels really bad when you're just wasting it. There is no limit on how many times you can do this. Okay. Well, that's neat. Wow. It's also in Wellspring Mage. I didn't realize you could just keep doing this. Alright, well, that's pretty cool. But still, it's only 4th level or lower. And at level 20, you're casting 10th level spells. Yeah, it's not always going to be useful. I'm sorry. It depends on your build. I can't advise it. I wouldn't take it, generally speaking, because you still have to take the time. So overall, the Time Mage is a fun, unique archetype. And it's strange, and that's nice. And I have been looking since 3rd edition D&D for an ability or potion that makes someone invulnerable to everything for a period of time. Stasis is that. And you can get it... I mean, of course, you could just take the domain feat. You could take Champion or Cleric or Oracle to get it. But it totally fits the vibe of this archetype. This is a very timey-wimey archetype, and it seems like so much fun and bizarre, especially if your GM is willing to work with you and, like, notify you about time changes or temporal shenanigans of any kind in an adventure. I think I'm going to suggest this to my players because they are time traveling, and they're traveling with a being of time who kind of hates them, but he also hates everyone, so it doesn't mean anything, really. And they would be able to sense a bunch of weird shit happening. Yeah, I'm gonna have to talk to them. This is cool. I hope you have fun with this. I will, like I already am. Thank you for letting me borrow your eyeballs. And if you're a patron, thank you for helping me out every month. I appreciate you. If you want to look into becoming a patron to support the channel, or if you just want to join Discord to just talk with us about future plans, but also just like chatting about character builds, plots, maps, storylines. Anyway, the links are in the description. And if you want to see the live stream of the Outlaws of Alkenstar. It'll be here. And over here will be more Archetype videos. Because you might want to see them because you've been watching Archetype videos. I know, I see you. Thanks.